afternoon, YouTube. I found this wonderful piece on the EPOCH Times. It's about an hour long. This is a prediction about how the election will turn out. So thank you for watching, and please enjoy.
Then, has the fate of the presidency actually been decided already? Is everything fait accompli?
Well, I think in the computer age, in the age of Silicon Valley, we've created this new pseudoscientific accuracy. So in the old days, maybe 20, 30 years ago, they had something called exit polls. So people and people lied as much to exit pollers as they did to regular pollers. But nevertheless, they would call elections based on what people in particular demographics said as they exited the polls. And then they learned very quickly that was not very accurate. So they didn't really call, after getting it burned a few times, especially in 76 and 80, they didn't really call until 30 or 40%. Then the computer age came, and they said they had these sophisticated data on age, gender, income, and they began calling them, and they started that. And then we had something like the Nate Silver phenomenon at 538, where these gurus, and almost to the decibel point, claimed they could call an election either by the poll before the election or on election night. And that crashed and burned in 2016. It was discredited this time around. But nonetheless, there's so many people invested into that methodology that we saw on Fox. Not only did Fox, take one example, call Arizona when it was still close and is still close as we were filming this, but they didn't call Florida and they didn't call Texas. And that created a mythology or narrative that night that whatever Donald Trump might do to question the voting sanctity later on, it didn't really matter because he'd lost his bastion in Florida and Texas, perhaps, and for sure in Barry Goldwater's Arizona. And then remember that Fox News and CNN and all of the networks said that the Republicans were going to lose. The Democrats were going to gain at least 5 seats so that their margin would widen. So there was a sense very early on in the evening that something had gone terribly wrong for the Trump campaign. The Senate was lost. The House was even more lost than it had been before, and Joe Biden was president. And that all of that turned out to be either untrue or not proven to this moment.
Well, so what are people supposed to believe today? I mean, we're having a kind of a foundational question here, right?
Yeah, we are. It's kind of an ancient question between your sensory perception, your common sense, your gut instinct, and what elites tell you. So most people have certain age-old benchmarks when they drive down the street and they think it's pretty diverse. They count signs. When they look at campaigns, they see one candidate in a basement and one crisscrossing the country. When they see rallies, they see one with 40,000 people and one with nothing. And they remember that's how we knew Harry Truman was going to beat Tom Dewey and that the Gallup poll was wrong. But so it's an age-old distrust of the pollsters, but that's a benign interpretation. A cynical interpretation says that in this new era where we've ended election day as a tradition, where 85% of the vote in some states is mail-in or it's early voting, and that decision will be made by millions of voters before the third debate, for example, or before the Hunter Biden scandal. And how it will be made, on what criteria, if people are tuning out the last 2 or 3 weeks of the really important part of a campaign where a candidate either melts or gets emboldened. And the answer is polls. So polls have become a very potent political weapon because they tell the voter in, let's say, first week in October, I wouldn't raise money when Trump's down 17 in Wisconsin. Why would you go out and vote when CNN says he's going to lose the popular vote by 12? Going to knock door to door when YouGov says that Trump has already lost, he's going to lose by 385 votes. 385 votes Biden's going to get in the Electoral College. So they're very potent use of a partisan tool. And when you combine that with this huge 21st century money made in Wall Street and Silicon Valley, the Bloomberg fortune, the Zuckerberg fortune, the Apple fortune, the Google fortune, combined it with the power, the invasive power of Silicon Valley to cancel people, deplatform them, block ads, censor news, reorder the order of a Google search, add that with his huge fortune. Michael Bloomberg, 50 million in Ohio, maybe 100 million into Florida, 100 million spent against Lindsey Graham. You've got a whole new dynamic that, we haven't really grasped the contours. The Republicans surely haven't. They had the election won on election. Get out the vote, put a sign on your yard, go to a rally. Yeah, this is what we do. And the Democrats just said, no, we have a virtual candidate. He's a shill for a hard left progressive agenda. The media's on board. They're going to have scripted questions to him. He's going to be teleprompting his answers. Any gap will be contextualized or blacked out on media. We'll censor any ad that we find effective on the part of the Trump. And then for 25 days, 30 days, 45 days before the election, we will be getting people out to vote, mail registration, and the ballot can be mailed the same day as they were registered. And we'll have third-party vote harvesters, blanket committees. So it's a whole new concept of an election, and it's very dangerous, and we're going to see it. We haven't seen anything in Georgia until like this, what's going to happen on January 5th. And since Sherman marched through Georgia, there's going to be a big march through Georgia, but it's going to be Silicon Valley money and Bloomberg money and leftist and computer data analytics and pollsters. It's going to be a nightmare because the fate of the country will hinge on those two elections. And we've never seen two elections in 1 year in one state, and runoff elections at that, and then the Senate that hinges on the decision in this one state. And the decision is not whether, a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat will switch chairs. It's whether a hard left majority will end the filibuster and with it pack the court or get rid of the Electoral College and on and on.
I actually want to talk a little bit about Georgia and the significance of the hand count that's now been, authorized or arranged. But before I go there, you've talked a little bit before about, this sort of fundamental change in how the elections are run. And it's something about how fundamentally people are basically, in a traditional sense, would have to actively go out to vote. They would have to go and actually do something themselves, as opposed to someone coming to their door and collecting, so to speak, or harvesting, to use that term. And this is just, again, a sort of a foundational shift of sorts. And I want you to dig into that a little bit more for me, please.
Yeah, we've reversed the concept of what it was to be an American. The founder's vision is we can capture it in the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, the writings of everybody from Hamilton to Jefferson, diverse as they were, was that we were, Tocqueville talked about, we were rugged individuals. We were autonomous citizens. We owned property most of the time. And we took it upon ourselves to guarantee our rights, which could always be taken away, with responsibilities to get out and vote, to inform yourself about the issues. And we just assumed that not everybody would do that. And if they didn't do it, it's a free country. Live and let live. You don't want to go to the polls? Don't go to the polls. You don't want to look about the issues? You just want to vote what somebody tells you. We have parameters. You can't pay a person to vote, or you can't block them. And when we tried on the basis of race or gender, we amended those contortions. But now what it is, that is racist, that is class bias, and we have to bring out the voter from the woodwork. We're not going to ask anything of the voter. So this was the next stage of the last 20 years. We're going to say to the voter, there's no such thing as an absentee ballot. There's a mail-in ballot. You don't have to be sick. You don't have to miss work. Just mail it in, and maybe then you won't suffer so much hardship by going to the polls, or you won't get dirty looks that will bother you. And then we've gone to the next stage after that, is we will come to your home. We will present you with a registration form that you may not have gotten. We will have you fill it out. We will take it to the registrar. We'll be back the next day with a hand-delivered ballot. or we will tell you how to vote. Then we will take that ballot and we will hand it to you. And if you still are confused and you still would be so stubborn as that you wanted to vote, here are the polls. We'll give you the polls, and we'll not just say Biden by 5. We'll say Biden has a 78.7 chance to win the election after we, Nate Silver and 538, have run it through 400,000 computer simulations. And so that's what we're doing. And then so we have a proverbial voter just back on the couch that says, what do you want me to do? Where do I put my X? And that's where we are. And that's considered fairer because we've taken every obstacle and every labor away from voting, as that reveals a true America. So we have two visions. The founders was the true American is the person that takes the initiative. And when he doesn't take the initiative and he doesn't get the result he likes, he will take the initiatives at some point. Otherwise, he's not going to be a participant, and he won't get a government that he thinks if he's in the majority, deserves. Or if he's in the minority, he won't get minority protection under democracy. But we've got away with that. The real American is under that veneer. We've got to bring him out and discover him and pamper him and massage him to vote in a way that we, the elite, think is in his interest. It's a very different concept.
Victor, as you're speaking, it just strikes me that this whole kind of approach, doesn't it make it so that the group that has the better machine, so to speak, or more money pumped into that machine wins? Is that that's what strikes me here? Yeah,
that is bothersome. But of course, that was always used against the Republicans, the dark Koch brothers money. I don't think the word dark money exists anymore because it's all on the left side, and they dropped it just as they dropped the phrase absentee ballot. So we know from the history of America what happens when huge amounts of money flow into a particular campaign, and the advertising and the warping of reality. But that's nothing compared to this postmodernism. We've never had this before, where you have pollsters who do all of these analytics, and then they, in concert, create a narrative that one candidate has no chance to win, when they know their methodology is flawed because it's flawed from the record of 2016, and they know it's flawed. And yet they feel that the poll is not to reflect public opinion, but to change it in a predetermined way. That's new. But even more disturbing is that Silicon Valley, as we're speaking right now, they're adjudicating which type of ad will be on social media. And when Facebook has about 50% of the world, 7 billion population plus world, social media, and Twitter has about a 90% monopoly on its particular shortened version of social media, and when Google controls 90% of all the Google searches, then you can really distort reality. You know, you can say Hunter Biden and do a Google search, and you might not find for 4 pages that he did anything wrong. It would probably be right-wing conspiracy to hurt the Biden family, story after story after story. And that's what we're up against. It's Orwellian, and I don't know where it's going to end, but when you combine that with the administrative's sudden shift in time of a national pandemic and quarantine, to suddenly say after 233 years of American tradition, oh, by the way, there is no more election day supremacy anymore. It's called mail-in ballot. We have a new word called mail-in and early voting, and this is what we're going to do. And it proved to be very conducive to the internet, Silicon Valley, and the use of money. And it was sort of a perfect storm. And I think the Republicans and conservatives had no idea. I know I didn't. I thought that maybe it would be difficult to turn in a mail-in ballot for somebody who'd never done it before. And I thought, by scaring everybody that we were living in the age of the bubonic plague, maybe they had scared away their own voters from the polls. We were all right about that. They did, but it didn't matter, because even if you didn't know how to fill out a mail-in ballot, there were resources available to you that you didn't have to. Somebody could come to your home and do it for you. So this is brave new world we're in.
I have to ask you this again before we sort of move on to Georgia and some other questions about prospective fraud. Is this going to actually be an issue? Is Trump actually being used as a kind of Emmanuel Goldstein here? This is just something that struck me today, frankly.
Yeah, I've written a couple columns about that. You know, the 3 minutes of hate of Donald Trump. I don't know what these cable news stations and columnists are going to do now, because we know that they called George W. Bush a Nazi and Mussolini, and Bush didn't really fight back, so it was kind of a boring topic. Michael Moore, Cindy Sheehan out of our past, but Trump fought back, and so he made it into a gladiatorial contest, and they were the spectators with their thumbs up or down. They loved it. And I mean, from the first, right after the election, which is very ironic because they're worried, the Democrats are saying we're worried about the integrity of election, and all sides have to assume responsibility to accept the will of the people. But that's Orwellian, because in 2016 they almost immediately had Jill Stein on their behalf sue 3 states, the key states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, to recount and say that voting machines were Russian collusion. Remember that they were tampered with. They weren't. And then we had the electors who were not supposed to vote as their individual state mandates dictated. And then we had celebrities, and then we had, blow up the White House with Madonna and all those protests on Inauguration Day. And then we went right into Mueller and Russian collusion, 25th Amendment, Emoluments Clause, Michael Cohen, impeachment, Ukraine. So, yeah, I'm really worried, because no president had ever been so systematically attacked like that, and no president had ever fought so fiercely in return. And we'll see what happens. But the media, Donald Trump was some kind of, I don't know what the word is, talesman, or he was some type of touchstone where anything that he got near revealed the true essence of what we all suspected, but we knew that they would never be revealed. He was a cipher. And by that I mean, we knew that the media was biased, but we never thought Jim Rutenberg or the New York Times or Christian Amanpour would say, yes, we are biased, and we're biased because we have to stop Donald Trump. Or we all thought that Anderson Cooper was kind of a fraud, but we never thought on air he'd say, why don't you just crap on your desk? He didn't use that word. Or we never thought people, right on the air would say, hands up, don't shoot. That fraud that we know Eric Holder's Justice Department proved was wrong in Ferguson. So he brought people out to say and do things that we've never seen before. James Comey is absolutely stark raving mad right now. And he wasn't. I mean, he was always a dubious character. So was John Brennan. But my God, they've reduced themselves to caricatures. Hillary Clinton was always suspect. But my gosh, when she said, I'm going to join the resistance, and I was cheated, and Donald Trump, we should never concede the election. We've seen a new dimension of reality that Donald Trump brought about. He really tore off the curtain and said, these guys have these little gears, and that Oz thing on the screen is just completely false. They're little, tiny, mean-spirited people. That was pretty effective. I don't know if he meant to do that, but he got them so obsessed that they became entirely unhinged.
Well, it's a very interesting situation, thinking back to these, how, let's say, the media and everybody else dealt with the Hunter Biden emails revelation. Of course, it was kind of it was an October surprise. It was left that way, to impact the election most likely. However, a lot of compelling evidence, was revealed via multiple sources, hard drives, email accounts, and so forth. And, which resulted in an unprecedented level of censorship and then self-justification of that censorship. And then, of course, the specter of Russian disinformation. Again, I'm asking myself, when is the specter of Russian disinformation coming back when it comes to the allegations of voter fraud now?
There's a Russian under every bed now. quite ironic that we were told that America had lost its mind because in 2016 it voted for a supposedly corrupt, supposedly racist, and supposedly family crime syndicate that colluded with Russia. All of that turned out to be false, but its antithesis is in 2020 that you had a corrupt Biden family, and anytime he went off script and ad-libbed, he said something racist from, you ain't black, or hey junkie, hey cokehead to an African-American reporter, and I could go on if pressed. And then he was not only corrupt, the Biden family, but also racist, but also extremely unkind. I mean, he was saying things that Nazi-like, and I'll take you behind the gym and beat you up, Donald Trump, and all sorts of corn pop stories. And the crudity was a much greater degree, believe it or not, than Donald Trump. So that was all the result of the media, that they had created this monstrous Trump, and then they had a reality to work with, and they completely distorted it on the case of Biden. And then you would have never thought, if you came from Mars and landed in America in August of 2020, that one enfeebled candidate was getting up in the morning and campaigning for an hour by remote computer assistant visual screens, and he was talking off a computer, and the questions he usually knew in advance, and he still couldn't do it. And his team then put him to bed, and he wasn't really able to go out, or if he was, he had to sleep for a number of hours before he could make a nocturnal appearance, while the other person, roughly the septuagenarian, the same age, was having these huge rallies. And you had one candidate who was terrified, given his age, of the virus, and was in complete lockdown. You had the other candidate who got the virus and was told that a man of his age and girth would be seriously ill, he'd be on a ventilator, he'll have post-viral fatigue, he'll have heart problems, and he got over it in basically 5 days. So, but all of that was the reality, but that was not what the voters saw. And I can tell you they didn't, because I've talked to some of them. They have no idea about this true story of Donald Trump, that he took enormous risks, but he had to as president, that he took experimental drugs that were very untested and didn't know the connections. All they knew is that he was reckless and he was a super spreader. That's what they were told, period. And if you go out in Los Angeles on election eve, or San Francisco, and you're tens of thousands of people are sharing wine with each other, same bottle, no mask, no hand sanitizer, that's perfectly normal. And if Gavin Newsom says that 2 weeks from now, you can't have more than 3 different families at your Thanksgiving gathering, you have to check your bathroom and have it sanitized every 15 or 20 minutes, and you have to wear a mask, and it has to be outside in November, then you can see why people were just bewildered. So it's like Animal Farm, the rules on the barn change. All animals are equal on Monday, and some animals are more equal than others. All outdoor gatherings are forbidden, but some outdoor gatherings are more equal than others. That's where we are right now.
On this media question, a great number of Americans just simply don't trust the corporate media or the legacy media. I don't know how you call them. Is this a trust that can never be earned back?
No, I don't think it can. I think that most people find a way by hit and miss to find out what's happening. They turn on talk radio, they go on certain blogs they know how to navigate to, they have email chain letters, they download podcasts or YouTubes. So far, not a lot of that's been censored, but the idea that you're going to have a network anchor, and he's going or she's going to address the nation, and and she's going to resonate wisdom and sobriety and be sober and judicious and disinterested and win the respect, that's gone. Nobody believes that. They're basically celebrities, most of them in the mainstream media. They think they're celebrities, but they have very little erudition, common sense. They come from a very narrow, I mean, they're fish in a very isolated little pond, and they swim with each other. I mean, they go, sometimes they get into government, they go back out. Sometimes they're in university, little billets as sinecures, and they come back to a media. And they go to the same journalism schools. If they do that, they have the same standards, and they all want to be liked. And the left controls the culture, the academic world, celebrity culture, Hollywood, professional sports, foundations. And that's what they worry about. They don't worry about the 52% of the people who are their customers. You know, it's kind of a crisis that the left is insidious, because you can nominate almost any conservative justices, and 50% of the time they will be lured into becoming progressive, whether it was John Paul Stevens or Harry Blackmun or Earl Warren, or you know, I think now John Roberts. Or you can have any standard-bearing media that says they're conservative. Weekly Standard goes defunct because it goes liberal. The Drudge Report flips over. There's a big contention now with Fox News. It never goes in the other direction, is what I'm saying, because of these insidious forces of culture are so powerful that people want to be considered cool or neat or liked or winners, and that insidious pressure just wears people down, I guess. They have no sense of who they are.
Well, Victor, I want to follow up on this a little bit before we finish, but now I want to kind of jump into this big question that's on a lot of, I know, our viewers' minds. You know, there's a lot of contentions of election irregularities, election fraud. There's recounts, at least one hand count going on in Georgia. What is the status as we speak of this? Is there some kind of a reality where Donald Trump can still win the election?
Yeah, he has a pathway, but I think there's a typology of approaches. So one is, for him to win, he needs momentum. I think North Carolina is in the process of being called. Donald Trump won that. And now, it's basically the math that he has to win everything that he won in 2016. And right now, in the South, if he wins Georgia and Arizona, he'll do that. And then he can lose Michigan and Wisconsin that he won last time, but he has to win Pennsylvania. Okay, so what's the status then? In one typology, he's forget the charges of fraud, forget anything, not that they didn't occur, but they're very close, Arizona and Georgia. And I think Donald Trump will come within 5,000 votes either way, and then there'll probably be a recount. If it's a hand recount, which is promised in Georgia, I think he'll probably win that. I'm not sure, but it'll be very close in Arizona. If he were to win those, that would create momentum along with North Carolina. And people would say, you see, they called Arizona and he won, or he won Georgia in a recount. And then all eyes and all resources would be focused on Pennsylvania. And there it's a little bit trickier because there's two approaches. One is, was there voter fraud? So far, the Republicans have filled their airwaves, talk shows, everything with, look at this guy was 90, he voted and he doesn't even live in Pennsylvania, or this woman died 10 years ago and voted. But they're anecdotal. They're not systematic, where we don't say, and this person represents 10,000 votes like this. That evidence has not yet been adduced. Or there's a computer glitch in Michigan, which is really suspicious, transferring votes electronically away from Trump. But is the same software being replicated in every county, and therefore can you find one more or one more? And what I'm getting at, Jan, is for these anecdotes to be powerful, there has to be a calculus in which they represent a majority vote in the end for Donald Trump by some mathematical analysis. If you say Wisconsin has almost 89% turnout, and we all went to bed with Donald Trump with 150,000, lead, and he ended up 20,000 back, because the most popular candidate prior to this election had been Barack Obama, a very charismatic candidate in a purple-blue state, and he only got 75. Well, that's damning evidence, but it's not conclusive unless you can show the actual vote. So that has to be adjudicated. And so the Republicans have to go to the next step. They prove that people cheat now and cheat to an inordinate degree, but they have to finish that work by saying, and this cheating led to these many votes. So that's half of Pennsylvania's struggle. If you lose that half, then you rest on the other half, and that says that in the U.S. Constitution, in Article 2, that the states shall determine the parameters of voting in national elections for senators, representatives, etc. But it says Congress can, as it sees fit, can intercede, and we know that they do, whether it's universal suffrage or 18-year-old vote. But otherwise, it's the legislatures. It doesn't say the judges. It doesn't say the bureaucrats. So when you had this rush to mail-in voting, remember that was the never waste a crisis mantra from everybody from Hillary to Gavin Newsom, that this lockdown gave enormous latitude to change the way we do things to favor progressive agendas. In any case, when we went into that mode, people started freelancing in Pennsylvania. They knew it was going to be the key state as it was in 2016. And so what did they do? They changed the voting laws that has been passed by the legislatures. Particularly, they said you really didn't have to have a ballot in on election night. Think of that. So after the vote was over, you could, I guess, you could vote and then postmark it. And if it didn't arrive in time, it was okay. And so the Supreme Court should have intervened, and they didn't. And now Judge Alito has put a stay. And so then we go to the next and final stage. If the Supreme Court wants to intervene and says Pennsylvania violated the U.S. Constitution and all of the laws that were passed as they should have been by the legislature are in effect, and all the modulations and machinations that were added by non-constitutional means are now inert, then we're throwing out all of those ballots and only counting, and we don't know how many they are, but they could be more than 70,000, and we don't know how they're going to break down. Are they military ballots, provisional ballots, which district? So that's where we are. But that's a windy explanation that we're far from having a solution yet, and we'll have to wait.
So that's part one. I need to continue with part two. Basically, I will overlap them since there is a bunch of facts over there that I would like to introduce at the beginning of part two. So thank you for watching.